5 Hall of Fame inductions, over a dozen championships, a racing career spanning 5 decades. Believe it or not, those are just a few of Scot Harden's accomplishments. But when you're widely considered one of, if not the best off-road racer like ever, your resume is obviously going to be long and distinguished. Scot started racing in the late 70s, eventually earning a spot on the Husqvarna race team, and traveled the world to tackle the toughest enduro courses out there, everywhere from the Baja 1000 to the International 6 Days Enduro, and a few rounds of Dakar as well. In addition to winning races, Scot also knows how to pivot, seamlessly transitioning from a successful racing career to an illustrious tenure as an executive with major manufacturers like Husqvarna, KTM, and interestingly, Zero Motorcycles. Nowadays, Scot works for himself, using his decades of racing success and industry experience to run Harden off-road, working on rider training, consulting, event promotion, and product development. Over his career, he's literally transformed the sport, but he doesn't hesitate to praise the support of his family, his mentors, and fellow racers, because like he says, we can't take motorcycling for granted. This is Scot Harden. I'm your host, Mark Long, and you're listening to Driven to Ride. All right, Scot Harden, you are on Driven to Ride. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's great. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the show. There's a ton to talk about. You've got a heck of a career, to say the least. I would say an off-road and motorcycle legend. But I want to start off kind of letting you introduce yourself. So what do people maybe most know you for, and what are your claims to fame? I know you have more than one, so.
Well, my name is Scot Harden. I'm the president and owner of Harden Off-Road, which right now is power sports consulting, event promotion, rider training company. I work with a number of different manufacturers and aftermarket companies, as well as promote my own events in the United States. I turned 70 years old this month, which is kind of crazy. But I've had a very long career in the industry, both as a professional racer, racing all of the longest, toughest off-road races in the world, Baja 1000s and Las Vegas 400s, and even the old Barstow to Vegas races, and Dakar and rallies and 6 days and all of that stuff. And then also I've had a very fun corporate executive career in the motorcycle industry, working for KTM, Husqvarna, BMW, Zero Motorcycles, a number of other companies as well. But kind of a little bit on both sides of the equation. Gives me kind of a unique perspective on the sport and the industry overall. I have been happily married for 47 years, with my wife for 52 years now as a couple. We just celebrated that. I have 2 sons who both work in the motorcycle industry, by the way. My oldest son works for Climb and is responsible for the product line, the motorcycle product line at Climb. And my youngest son works for Troy Lee Designs. And they also ride and race. And then I have 2 grandsons as well that we're bringing up as motorcyclists. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. I've been inducted into 5 different Hall of Fames: the AMA Hall of Fame, the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame, Trailblazers Hall of Fame, Hot Shoe Hall of Fame, Moran Hall of Fame. Just very blessed, extremely blessed to make it this far.
Claims to fame being multiple was not an understatement. So,
yes, well, just very blessed, very blessed.
Yeah, very cool. So, one thing I want to know, just kind of from the get-go, is how did you even start riding in the first place?
Well, my first experience on anything with 2 wheels and an engine, of course, growing up in the 60s and early 70s, we all had bicycles with Stingrays, and, we'd take off. And I was born and raised in Las Vegas. Yeah. On a farm in Las Vegas, actually, the first dairy farm in Las Vegas. And we were out in the country and we had all sorts of areas to explore. But we also were avid hunters. My family were hunters. And at deer camp one year, one of our friends brought a tote goat to deer camp. And many of you might know what a tote goat is, but probably many of you don't. But it was a lawnmower engine, Briggs & Stratton engine powered, rigid framed, angle iron frame vehicle, but it had 2 things. It had a engine and a throttle, and they let me ride it. I was about 10 years old, And I ended up burning through all of the gas that they brought up that weekend for the thing. Normally they use it to go in and haul deer out into rough and rugged areas. They'd strap it over the back and haul it out, but they had no fuel for it when I was done. Shortly after that, my grandparents bought me a Taco mini bike. So my first owned two-wheel vehicle was a Taco 22 mini bike.
Okay, nice. So you were basically hooked from like the get-go.
Yeah, growing up where I did, we were out in the country. There was all sorts of desert and places to roam and see and go to in southern Las Vegas. There, way out off of Pecos Road and Sunset out there. There was just nothing out there. We were the last. The pavement ended at our house at that time. Nowadays, we're in the middle of the city. It would be in the middle of the city in Vegas, but yeah, it was just incredible. I progressed up from there to larger and larger motorcycles, and then I started to notice that there were races, and they were being held very close by. There was a motocross track, a natural motocross track. The late '60s and early '70s were really a golden era for motorcycles and the whole sport, and it all came to fruition then with all the Japanese product that was coming into the market and the Europeans still being around and all of that. And so I got attracted to the racing side. And then, of course, 1971 rolled around, the summer of 71, and my life got changed because of a stupid movie called On Any Sunday.
Well, it's funny because I was going to bring up On Any Sunday. I mean, you talk about the late 60s, early 70s. A lot of people, I think about, the UJM street bikes that came through, but, off-road was just as popular, and there was just as many, Asian off-road bikes that were coming through. And, not everybody was a street rider. I mean, off-road was such a big thing, I think, and people don't even realize it.
Oh, I remember one day we were out riding in our normal area, and we went over to another area that we hadn't been to before, and I crested this hill, and there must have been 150 people out there all riding around. It was mind-boggling, and they were just there, not racing or for anything organized. They were just parked there and riding. And I mean, it was mind-boggling. If you look at the unit sales back there, that's when the industry first topped 1 million units in the United States. And it took us until the mid 2000s to get back to 1 million units.
Wow.
So by comparison, and now we're around 500,000 units a year. So it kind of gives you a perspective of just how big it was then.
Yeah, especially if you think about, the population difference in the 70s compared to the 2000s. And that's pretty fascinating. On Any Sunday, though, obviously a landmark motorcycle movie. What was that first time like when you watched it, and how did that change your life?
Well, it was the summer of 71. We heard about it. I rode my motorcycle, my Suzuki 125 Duster, through the desert, hopped off and crossed the paved road crossings all the way into town to the movie theater, watched it, got hooked on it. I would go see it 3 times a week. And what I would do is I learned that if I left the room just before the end and went in the bathroom and kind of hung out in one of the stalls, I could wait, and then they'd start the next showing and I would go back and watch it again. My record was 3 showings in a day. And honestly, I would do that. I did that all through the month of August. I must have seen it 20 or 30 times that month.
Yeah.
Just incredible. And then, of course, I'd get on my bike and ride home through the desert, and I'd be singing on Any Sunday under my helmet, and the music would be playing in my head and all of that stuff. It was just transformative.
Yeah.
Truly transformative.
So was that before or after you kind of had gotten into the racing scene?
I hadn't raced yet. My first race was soon to come. It was later that fall was my first race. My parents, I was raised by my grandparents. They said that I could never race. Don't ever get a thought of that. And they went out of town one weekend, and my friend took me out. My older friend, Kent Nichols, took me out to the local race, and his dad signed me up. And I raced my first race. Of course, my grandparents found out about it very quickly. And
Oh, really?
instead of just taking everything away, they said, well, if you want it this bad, next time we're going to take you. And that started it. So the fall of 1971 was when I got my first racing experience.
Okay. And just so we've got some context, the next, I'm trying to do the math in my head, 40 years you kept on racing, right?
Well, almost 50. I mean, my final professional race was in 2007. I was working for KTM at the time, and I rode the Baja 500 for the 15th or more time. I did it professionally from 75 to 86, never missing hardly a race. But, then corporate things and business got in the way, and I still rode and raced. But my final one was the 2007 Baja 500. I rode with my son, and Mike Lafferty were my teammates.
Oh, cool.
And of course, I had just done Dakar in 2004 and 5 at the age of 50, almost 50 years old.
That's cool.
Team manager and one of the riders for the KTM Red Bull US Dakar effort. So that was after Dakar in 2005, 7,000 miles, 18 days. At my age, and as my bucket was full.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, after 5 decades, and I mean, because the thing is, I think I want to set the table properly. Is we're not talking about like, oh, we just did like a race on a Sunday or something like that, or we didn't do. It was this is like you said, Baja 1000. This is Dakar. This is like multi-day, like super long enduro racing. I mean, it's hardcore stuff that you've done,
I did all the longest, toughest, hardest, longest distance off-road races in the world for 50 years. And I'm alive to tell about it. I have a lot of friends who are paralyzed from it. I have a lot of friends who died from it. I saw a lot of really bad things happen to really good people from it. And I'm just very, very fortunate to have made it through it and still be in one piece and still be able to ride. It's a real blessing.
Skipping ahead a little bit, what was your first kind of major race that you got into?
Well, I raced locally, the local association, 71, 72. I won a number 1 plate my first full year of racing in the 125 class. In 73, I switched to a 250. And back then, probably the biggest race, absolutely the biggest race in the world was Barstow to Vegas.
Okay.
The Barstow to Vegas Hare and Hound. There were 3,000 entries that year. 3,000 entries. It started just east of Barstow, and it ran all the way to Vegas, 170-mile point-to-point hare and hound. We'd gone over and watched the finish of it the year. I'd ridden it in 72 on a 125 and got second in class there, did really well in the top 60 or 70 bikes that year. And then in 73, I rode on a 250, and I got third overall, first 250 expert.
Wow.
And was on the podium there. And I was 17 years old, and against much older riders and everything. And that kind of put me on the map, and kind of not only just with the public and with sponsors and everything, but also in my own head mentally, I realized that I could compete at that level. And that's what started me. So 73, Barstow to Vegas, and then went on to win some. I won my first big professional off-road race then, the 1973 Snort 250. And then I started doing mid 400s and then quickly down to Baja for Baja events. And, my whole goal then was to be a factory rider for Husqvarna.
Okay.
There were 4 openings at Husqvarna back then for their Baja off-road team, because back then you rode as a 2-man team, and they entered 2 bikes in each race, 2 factory entries. So I wanted one of those 4 slots, and eventually in 76, I got one of those spots, and that from then on it was off to the races, as we say.
So yeah, it sounds like it was almost kind of a natural progression where you just kind of started locally, like you said, and then went to higher distance and more distance and stuff like that. Kind of dare I say, maybe traditional ascension in that regard.
Well, it's easy. Malcolm Smith was the blueprint on any
Sure.
Sunday.
Yeah.
Right. The lone dust cloud across dry Lake Chapala. Even 6 days later, when I did 6 days, I thought back to Malcolm. Malcolm and I later in life became very good friends. In
Cool.
fact, I spoke at his celebration of life. I was one of the few people honored to speak at his celebration of life. So for a kid sitting in that movie theater to everything that happened after that, it was really a miracle. But I was very blessed in that, I grew up in a time and an age when it was possible to do those things.
Sure. Yeah.
Fuel was 28 cents a gallon for a while there. You could buy a motorcycle. Yeah, they were expensive, but it was achievable. My family wasn't wealthy or rich by any stretch of the imagination. And then I was very fortunate that I came across some older riders who took me under their wing, which I'm a big proponent of now, is older, experienced riders taking new people under their wing to show them the way. And one of them guys was Casey Folks, and the other was Max Schweitzer, two legends in Las Vegas. And they took me under their wing, especially Casey, showed me the ropes, taught me how to work on my bike, how to think about racing, how to prepare, how to plan, all of those things. And I was just, I had all the right ingredients around me, Mark. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better setup.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people, I mean, obviously when you see somebody racing or you hear about, all the accolades, it's a lot of it does come down to natural talent. And I think just kind of raw nerves of steel, just be able to race and go faster. But I like what you said, where it was, you had some mentors and you had people guiding you, because there is so much more than just trying to go, as fast as possible. There's understanding the motorcycle. There's, learning about racing, especially off-road, which is, a whole different ballgame than street riding or road racing. I mean, can you tell me kind of, in your experience, some of the unique challenges, which may sound obvious, but, the unique challenges that off-road and like long distance racing does as compared to like road racing?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. In the desert races that I would run, the hare and hounds and all that stuff, to win overall, that meant you were leading the race, which meant you weren't following anybody. You were going over terrain the first time at speeds up to 80, 90, 100 miles an hour. And that takes a lot of skill and ability, a lot of technique, a lot of physical training to get in shape to do that. Yeah. It also takes a real tough mental edge. And the best piece of advice I got early on was from Casey, who told me, racing isn't for daredevils. It's not just about holding the throttle wide open in the dust and taking chances and hoping for the best. He stressed that it was a thinking man's sport. And that never left me. You have to think, you know when to risk, know when the opportunities present themselves to go for it. And the other times when, hey, this isn't the time. You need to lay back here. If you push it too hard here, something bad could happen, And I made it through my whole career. I broke bones and was injured and was out for years and that, but I never had a serious major injury where I was out for a whole season or anything like that. And I attribute that to a lot of the mentoring that I got and just making good decisions. You make a million decisions a race, and you have to make all of them good decisions. All it takes is one bad decision to screw it all up. And so, it's just developing the right mindset, approaching it seriously. I went to the Husqvarna International Training Center. Rolf Tiblin, another great mentor, world champion, took me under his wing and showed me how to train properly and went through that whole rigor. Mitch Mays, one of the instructors there, another top desert racer at the time. I just had all these people, these resources around me that, with good information that, pointed me in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, kudos to you though, too, for listening and then applying that information, because I, to be honest with you, I kind of lost count of how many championships you have. I got to like the Baja 1000, I think the Baja 500, and I think ISDE. And I'm like, okay, this guy's got like a million of them. Like, I want you to toot your own horn for a second. How many championships do you have?
Well, I won 3 number 1 plates. I was the first rider in Nevada to win 3 number 1 plates in the 125, 250 and open class. I've won the Baja 1000 overall 3 times. I mean, the fastest overall vehicle at it. I
Yeah.
won the Baja 500 overall 3 times, the Parker 400 twice, the Las Vegas 400 4 times overall. These were against the best racers of the day, the Larry Rosslers and Bruce Ogilvy's and Jack Johnsons and all the other top racers of the day. I did 3 ISDEs. I got a gold, a silver, and a bronze medal. I was selected for the U.S. Trophy team in 1982. We finished second in the world at Czechoslovakia, which at that time was the highest finishing U.S. trophy team ever until just recently when we finally won it. Actually, we got cheated out of the win that year. We should have won it that year, but we got cheated out of it. But I did that. And then I went to rally racing in Africa. I kept looking for new horizons. And I was the second U.S. rider to go to Africa and race long distance rallies in North Africa. And right out of the box, I won stages. I was on the podium at 3 different events. I won one event overall, all looking towards Dakar, a shot at doing Dakar. And the first 4 events I did, I was on the podium 3 times and was the first American to win a rally overall over there, a Dakar style rally.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I couldn't land a factory ride because I wasn't French, Italian, or Belgian or Spanish, because it was all political, very political back then.
Right.
So I came home from all that in the late 80s and went to work for KTM, where I stayed for 20 years. And then near the end of my term with KTM, they asked me to put together a U.S. Dakar effort. And finally, at a much later age, when I was much older, certainly from a competitive standpoint, I wasn't ready to win overall, but I still did quite well. My late 49 years old was my last Dakar. So, I won AMA national champion, amateur national championships, and just a lot of races, wide variety. I took on a wide variety from desert to Baja to 6 days to rallies to regular Grand Prix, motocross. I don't know. I raced everything. I raced everything I could.
Yeah. So is there like a common thread? I mean, obviously those are wildly different races, wildly different, disciplines in the motorcycling world. But is that mental kind of strategy and the thinking man's kind of sport? Is that the through line for all of your racing experience?
Well, yeah, you had to approach each race. You had to be very serious about it. You had to have, be composed and thoughtful and understand what you were trying to achieve that given day. I never went into a race. I rode with emotion, and if I got mad, and what should I tell you? Don't ride with emotion because you just make bad decisions. But I was able to channel my emotion and still make good decisions into a productive form. But I think the number one thing that ran through all of it was just the camaraderie and the sense of community and belonging that you felt no matter where you went, because the racing that I did wasn't for big money, although, I did make money at it. I did race professionally. It was families, it was mostly families and guys that grew up through families and eventually got to that level. And so, rallies, for example, when you're in a rally in Africa, there's no other community that you ever want to be a part of than that. Everything's so heightened, the feeling around it, the challenges each day. It's like closest thing that going to war that I can imagine, where you're all in some sort of activity where, you're going to go out and do battle each day, but at the end of the day, you come back and you're still part of the same troop. And I don't know. That part runs true through all of my experiences on off-road.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah. One of the things I've noticed through talking to all kinds of folks is that there is this, I think, special camaraderie in the off-road world where it is a lot of common folk, I guess you could say, or people that are, I guess, salt of the earth, maybe you could say, that are just genuinely good people and just genuinely love riding. Yeah. Yeah. And they genuinely love riding. And it's not necessarily about, winning. Obviously there's competition to it, but it's just about having a good time. That seems to me that that's a big through line in a lot of off-road folks I've talked to. So.
Yeah, no, it's very blue collar. I still go to the races today, and I see it today when I'm
Mm.
walking around the pits and stuff, and it really does my heart good to see that it's still alive and well. And although I wish we had more riders coming into the sport, that's another topic maybe we can talk about later. But how we keep this everything going for the
Hmm.
future. I'm a big advocate for that. But yeah, I wouldn't trade anything for it. I met some really good people. I met my wife through it.
Oh, no way.
My wife, my biggest competitor growing up locally in Las Vegas was Jack Johnson,
Hmm.
another fellow AMA and Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Famer, a fellow Baja 1000 overall winner, another legend in the sport. Well, I married his sister. And for the longest time, he was my number one competitor. In fact, we weren't really good friends for a long, long time because of that. We were just related through marriage and everything. But, later, once the racing was over, he's my absolute best friend in life.
Cool.
We are so close. He's like a brother to me.
Hmm.
And now that we're not competing for the same thing and against each other, it was tough there for a long time with him
Yeah,
to
that's
have.
a complex relationship a little
It
bit.
is, well, Thanksgiving dinners and Christmases and stuff and everything were sometimes a little awkward, depending on who had just won the last big race because, in addition to all the wins, I was always in the hunt. I had 15 overall wins at the big off-road races, but I
Mm.
had not, I had 19 races where I finished second overall.
Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, with just a few little changes, I could have had double the amount of wins. And in many of those second overalls, my brother-in-law was the guy who beat me.
Yeah, that's
So in
tough.
his partner, so it's tough. And
That's
same
tough.
vice versa. Many of the ones where he got second overall, I beat him. So it's tough, but I'm glad we could get to this point, and survive it all, and both of us are alive and well. We have some
Yeah.
great stories when we're alone together. We have some great conversations.
I was going to say, I'm sure there's some pleasant surprises that come up in some conversations after the fact.
Well, the main thing is we look at each other, and we're driving the other day, and he said, I just out of the blue, I said, do you realize how stupid we were? All the crazy things we did.
You're
Can
right.
you imagine all that at this stage of our lives? He said, we're damn lucky to be alive. And he just laughed. He said, yep, just offer a trophy and, a little bit of recognition and on to the next race. And I said, you're right. We did just hang it out there for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so that's a great segue because you did that again through the '80s. You mentioned, and then went to work for KTM. So, how did you make that jump from racer to kind of industry career?
Well, that's interesting. While I was going racing professional, I was also going to college,
Oh, really?
and I went
Okay.
to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and I wasn't able to focus on it as well as I should. I got my associate's degree. I didn't get my full bachelor's, but when I was racing for Husky, I let the management at Husky know. They asked me, after I'd won the Baja 1000 for the third time and they made me a team manager of the team and stuff on the side. They
Hmm.
asked me what I wanted to do my future. And I said, I want to work in the industry. And at the
Interesting.
end of 81, after I won the 1000 again and had got a gold medal in 6 days and had a number of other big races that year, they invited me down and interviewed me for a position and brought me in to manage the Husky products line,
Hmm.
accessory line for a bit there. And then they quickly transitioned me into sales as a district sales manager for Husqvarna in 82, which I was there. Husqvarna was everything to me. That's all I wanted to be a part of. I was going back to On Any Sunday. And
Right.
from 82 until 86, when Kajiva bought it, I was there and I stayed around with Kajiva for a while. I left after Kajiva for a while. I saw a lot of challenges and issues there with them and left and went and raced rallies in Africa for 2 years. And then when I came back from that in 88, I got a call from KTM. Rod Bush was made president of KTM in 88, and I was his first hire.
Oh,
I
wow.
managed the Western United States sales and then became vice president of marketing and Western Racing and media relations there from 88 to 2008.
Okay.
So we grew KTM from a small little company. We helped grow it from nothing into a ginormous company during that period.
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of one of the cornerstones now of motorcycling, which is cool.
Well,
so
when we started, it was nothing. Trust me.
Well, so going back in the day a little bit, I think nowadays it's kind of relatively common to see racers kind of go into the industry as start their career in the industry and all that. Was that common back in the day too, or not really?
Not really. I mean, most guys just saw themselves very, one-dimensional. I'm a racer, and they never really gave thought of it. Of course, going to college and, using my head and everything, I was always another good piece of advice from Casey was, hey, you're not going to be a racer all your life. You got a few years you can do it. You have to do something else. You should really think about it, and you should work in the industry. You'd be perfect. And so when I went to work for Husky, I was very fortunate in that I got hired by a gentleman named Mark Blackwell. Mm-hmm. And Mark Blackwell, again, another Hall of Famer. And when you look in the sport of motorcycling, there's no one that's done more as a racer and as a corporate executive than Mark. Mm-hmm. He went on to run Husqvarna, and then he was head of advertising at Suzuki, and then went on to start the Victory line. He was hired by Polaris to start the Victory line up, mm-hmm. and was there for many years, and just a legend in the sport. And when he brought me in, he was my role model. Again, having a role model like Mark to look up to, that, hey, you can be a racer and you can be, a businessman. You can be a corporate executive at a very high level. And Mark's training really instilled that in me and gave me the confidence with it to move forward. So again, having role models and having somebody to look at, and there were very few at that time, but Mark was and still is, in my opinion, the ultimate role model for, man, what you could do if you really just put your head to it and, get the education, be smart, be diligent about it. I was very, very fortunate,
Yeah.
There's a few guys like that. Him, Rod Bush later on, but very fortunate. But nowadays, they are transitioning more into it. Mm-hmm. I would say this. I don't see a lot of them transitioning into corporate executive positions. I see them transitioning into, ambassador.
An influencer, an ambassador, a rep, or something like that. Yeah.
Things like that. Yes, mm-hmm. Which are great positions and important positions as well.
Yeah.
Very few have, climbed the ranks to be vice presidents of major corporations. So I feel very fortunate to have made it that far.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that somebody gave you that advice, is that, you only got so many years to race. And clearly that is, you were the exception to that rule, because you were able to both do racing and be a corporate executive at the same time. I mean, it sounds like you had a great role model, like you mentioned, who kind of supported that lifestyle. But I mean, how do you balance that? I mean, are you working 9 to 5 and then you're just racing on the weekends? Or, I mean, do you get to the PTO has to be insane.
Well, I was lucky with the companies I worked for and the people I worked for. So Husqvarna, off-road company, very oriented towards that, and then KTM, the president there, Rod Bush, who mm-hmm. rebuilt KTM, was as responsible as any single individual for what KTM became. And it was another great role model. He was from West Virginia. He wasn't classically trained. He didn't have a college education, but he had more common sense and absolute and business sense than anybody I've ever met. And he also had a tremendous amount of loyalty and trust that he built with his employees. The people who worked for Rod would die for him, which was another great example. But, we used that. We channeled our personal knowledge and experience in the sport into the products that actually came out through these companies. A great example is the 300 two-stroke. Mm-hmm. One of the things I'm most proud of is that Rod and myself and Mike Rosso and a couple of other people at KTM were responsible for bringing the first 300 two-stroke motorcycle to market. Mm-hmm. And it revolutionized the market for off-road vehicles. In the beginning, nobody wanted it. The other distributors around the world didn't want it. The KTM, and we launched it in 1990. Well, by the end of the 90s, it was the single best-selling full-size bike in KTM's line globally, and
Wow.
was up until just recently.
Mm-hmm.
And it is for a number of other manufacturers now too. We created that model because we saw an opportunity, a hole in the whole product line. Back in the late 80s, all they had were 125s, 250s, and open bikes. And that's what every manufacturer determined their product line based on.
Sure.
Nobody made a 300 back. What class is that go in?
Yeah.
What FIM class? We realized that it didn't matter about class. It mattered just if it was a good bike. And we already knew who the market was for it, the vet rider, the rider that wanted a lightweight 250 that would have more torque like an open bike, but wouldn't wear on them. Anyway, we revolutionized the industry with that bike. But that came about because we were riders. As riders, we understood intrinsically what that package could do for the experience. And we knew that if it pleased us, that it would please other riders. And we just had to have the smarts and business sense and salesmanship to convince the factories to build it.
Yeah.
We did that with a number of others. The Sport Mini line was another thing at KTM that we created outside of what the factory was doing. We saw an opportunity and created that whole product line without the factory's help. We got other manufacturers to make that for us for several years until we grew the business into such a business that the factory said, "Hey, that's really huge. Why aren't we doing it in the factory?" We said, "Great idea. Let's build them in the factory."
Yeah.
And we did that. And then to launch that whole line, I was responsible for creating the KTM Junior Supercross Challenge. I worked on that, sold that to Pace Entertainment back in the early 80s. Myself, Rod Bush, and Selvaraj Narayana pushed that out, and we got that up and going. I ran that for the first 3 years. We did some things back then that really transformed the industry. I'm very proud to say.
Yeah.
And it was just because of our background. It was able to take the things that we knew as riders and translate. And then we had a factory at the other end that trusted and listened to us, especially as we were successful with it, to get it to shape the way things happened and what came out the other. Now I just saw where Kawasaki this week launched their new 327 two-stroke. I don't know if you saw that. But
no, I didn't.
Kawasaki's back in the two-stroke market.
Wow. Yeah.
With the 327. They're taking the same idea and maybe taking it and making it a little bit better.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
I don't know. It's crazy the impact that we kind of had, we're able to have. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. It's got to be super cool to kind of look back and see all that in retrospect and kind of where we are now and where the industry's going. One of the things that was interesting too, I saw on your resume, is that you spent some time with Zero motorcycles.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, that's all. We could probably spend a whole bunch of time talking about electric motorcycles, but how did you make that transition over to Zero?
Well, when I left KTM at the end of my tenure, 20 years with KTM, I actually went back to work for Husqvarna under BMW ownership for a few years there when BMW owner. I have the claim to fame that I'm the only person to manage the Husqvarna line under the Swedes, the Italians, and the Germans.
That's impressive.
I worked for all three companies managing the Husqvarna line because that was very near and dear to my heart. But at the end of that run, I was approached by Zero, and I was very intrigued about the possibility in the future. And again, I always thought of myself as being fairly innovative and always looking forward to what the next big thing is. And I really saw electric as that. And I took a lot of flack for it. I mean, when I joined, a lot of my friends in the motorcycle industry looked at me like I'd grown a horn in the middle of my head or something. They just didn't understand it or get it. There was a lot of negative reaction against electric bikes when they first came out. They just, people didn't see it. I could see the possibility there, and the possibilities still exist. Mm-hmm. It's just that there's still some challenges for them to overcome to make it acceptable to a broader segment of the market related to energy density and recharge times. The electric stuff is selling like crazy in the smaller product lines, the mini bikes, the pseudo mountain bike type products, that the form and function of the batteries and the energy density work in those applications. Where they're not quite there yet is in the full size lines.
Sure.
Although Stark Varg in the off-road segment and some of the other guys in the off-road are getting close to that, Zero still is struggling there. And what I mean by energy density is they just can't put enough battery in them to have the range that they need for a person to say, this is my only bike.
Sure.
It's very limiting what you can do with those. And of course, because of that, the cost of it is, marginally more expensive. The recharge times are still too long. If they could solve those three issues, range, recharge, and cost, once they have those solved, then it's going to get really serious with electric.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up that the demand is there, especially in the smaller stuff, because so I live about 50 miles west of Chicago, so I call it the bleeding edge of the suburbs, and there's a lot. So it's nice and quiet, and there's a lot of outdoor space and stuff. And man, I see a lot of kids on electric dirt bikes or electric scooters, or kind of these. I mean, they're pretty powerful. They go pretty fast, but the encouraging thing is that there are kids and young people riding two wheels. And I think, and I'd love to kind of get your take on this. My thought is that it doesn't matter whether it's electric or gas. The fact that they're on two wheels is the important thing, and that the demand is still there to like go outside and enjoy a two-wheeled experience.
Well, I'm 100% with you, Mark. I mean, electric is extremely important in the future of motorcycling because of the entry level part of it. But that is also a double-edged sword.
Okay.
Much like the three-wheeler movement back in the early 80s was great for the industry initially, it was also almost the death of the industry when it came down to CPSC and regulations, people getting hurt on them.
Yeah.
And we're already starting to see this arise with the electric bikes. The lawsuit and the kid in Orange County that unfortunately hit an elderly person, and they passed away from it on an electric bike. There's a lot of training that needs to be done. I'm afraid there's going to be a lot more regulation that comes down the road here because of things like this, because, parents are turning these kids loose on these things. They make a lot of power. I mean, one of the companies I'm with, SSR right now, we just launched a new ePro 15, this kind of a, pseudo mountain bike looking product, but more like a dirt bike. I think does 65 miles an hour like that.
Yeah, because it's instant torque basically, and torque,
and you don't hear it coming. You're aware
that's
of
a good
it.
Point.
Around it, you there's a lot of things, but you give these to these kids and they take off with them, and they're next thing you know, they're riding them down the street, they're riding them on sidewalks, they're flying by people's houses. They don't have the awareness of all the things that could go wrong. They just take it for granted that nobody's backing their car out, or that there's somebody not coming around the corner the other way. And I don't know, we got to be really careful about this, or else we're going to really ruin a really good opportunity with electric for the opportunities that it provides here real soon. And the industry's going to have to really step up and get some good language around communication and training and how we handle this, how we approach this. But I'm with you. I think they're great. I think we're going to do awesome with those things.
Yeah, it's a good point that a couple of things that the kids, they don't know any better. And if parents aren't educating or trying to, be careful. I mean, I remember when I first started riding a motorcycle on the street and got my license, my dad wouldn't let me ride by myself. We were always we were next to each other, and I had to do that for probably 2 months until it was like, no, I made up some excuse of like, well, where I'm going to go is really busy and there's not going to be, places to park. So I need to take the motorcycle and blah, blah, blah. And I need to go by myself. And that was my excuse to get out. But, I had a relatively tight leash, motorcycling wise growing up, and
a good thing and a good thing.
It is. Yeah, exactly. I'm thankful for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, having these kids, when you're, you can't drive, but you have a bicycle, you can only go 25 miles an hour on a bicycle as opposed to 35, 40, 50, 60 on these e-bikes. You're right. There is a lot more responsibility, I think, that comes with that extra power that kids don't necessarily have an appreciation for.
We're going to have to be really careful here. And I can already see it coming. There's going to be regulation and pushback, especially if there's more accidents, and there will be from it. But going back to it, my two grandsons learned on electric mini bikes,
Oh,
and it
wow.
was great because they're not intimidating. They didn't need a clutch. They didn't have to worry about a clutch. There wasn't a lot of sound to intimidate them when they revved it up.
Oh, sure.
The torque and the ability to control the power setting, the delivery is so linear that you can really figure out the throttle and what happens on an electric bike very quickly.
Okay.
And they both learned on electric. Now they're riding internal combustion bikes, of course. But their their ramp up to their learning curve was so much steeper, so much quicker with the electric than it would have been on a regular bike. I think
Interesting.
there's just so much to that, all of
Hmm.
that we really need to not blow a really good thing.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine you're seeing kind of you're at the bleeding edge of kind of what's new and the trends and what's happening in the technology and stuff with Harden Off Road. So, can you tell me how you kind of started Harden Off Road and a quick overview of what you guys do?
Well, thank you. You know, I started an event called the Nevada 200 Trail Ride back in 1985. It was just to bring people together and experience. We just it was held in Eastern Nevada. Uh, I've been doing it for 42 years now. And riders come together from all over the United States for a weekend of riding, fun, camaraderie, parties, bench racing sessions, all sorts of activities that bring people together, the community together, share it. And Harden Off Road was set up initially to do that, but later I started doing rider training. So I was
Hmm.
funneling my rider training through it. And just like my friend told me early on when I was a racer, he said, you're not going to be a racer all your life. You need to have a plan moving forward. And why don't you think about getting a job in the industry? Well, just like the same thought that applies to that applies to Hard Off Road. I knew I wasn't going to be an employee for somebody all my life. And
Okay.
certainly as I grew older, you're more and more limited on what you can find out there. So I built Harden Off Road over the years. I ran my professional racing through it. I ran my events through it. Now I do three big events a year. I do the Nevada 200. I have another event coming up in Chalice, Idaho next month.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The Yankee
Yeah.
Fork Rendezvous.
Yeah.
We'll have 100 riders there, all coming together. Damon Bradshaw will be our special guest for that event. And then I do another event called the Nevada Rally Experience for adventure and dual sport bikes. So I got those three big events. I run all my power sports consulting activities through it. And I also write articles for magazines and other things and other special projects that I'm involved in. So I can funnel it all under Hard and Off Road. And when I left the corporate world 10 or 12 years ago, there was Hard and Off Road was sitting there and already set up and ready for me to do whatever I want with it. And besides being a great tax write-off for everything that I do,
Yeah.
it's working great, absolutely great.
That's good. Yeah, it's interesting because you talked about at the start where learned that riding and racing was a thinking man's kind of thing. You're kind of looking ahead to the next step. You're always thinking about what's coming up. It sounds like that lesson not just applied to racing, but to your whole professional career and now to your own entrepreneurial endeavors.
It is. I mean, my wife and I were talking the other day. I mean, I'm 70 this month, and but I'm still extremely active and got more stuff going on than ever. And we go, well, when are we slowing down? When are we going to stop doing this? But, honestly, we're having so much fun doing it. And the stuff that we're doing, I think, we're giving back. A lot of the stuff that I do, a third of the stuff that I do is pro bono to
Oh,
give
really?
back.
Sure.
And through my events and stuff, we raise money for local communities and for trails clubs and everything. I'm out, on any given weekend helping clear trail with some of the clubs and stuff. So my schedule is extremely active, and Hard and Off Road gives me the platform to be able to do all of this stuff and still raise money and do all these things that I can help give back to the sport. I
Hmm.
mean, honestly, Mark, about a third of my time right now is dedicated to giving back. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
Well,
try.
your dedication to the sport, and I think all of that giving back has been pretty well recognized in the industry. I don't know anybody, I think, at all in the world who's in 5 different halls of fame. And if I get this wrong, please let me know. But the AMA Hall of Fame, the Trailblazers Hall of Fame, the Hot Shoe Hall of Fame, the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame, and then the Motorcycle Racing Association Nevada Hall of Fame. Did I get them all?
Yes, you did. Yes,
what is that? What does that mean to you to be in? I mean, it's got to be humbling just to be in one of those. What's it mean to you to be in 5 different halls of fame after such an illustrious career?
The coolest part for me is when I go to the induction ceremonies and everything, I get to meet all of my heroes that I had growing up. Brad Lackey, he's become a good friend of mine. And Brad was a hero to me growing up. When he won that world championship in motocross after all those years, I cried. I was so happy for him. I didn't know him, but now he's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Brock Glover, another rider that's had an amazing career. He's a good friend of mine. And so Malcolm, I mean, the list, guys from dirt track, Kevin Schwantz, world road racing champion. He and I we're trail riding buddies now.
Oh, no way.
Because, I met him through the Hall of Fame, and he's now lives in Idaho up here. In fact, he's coming to my ride next month, but I'm getting to meet Kenny Roberts, all these people to me that I still worship, and I'm just like a kid when I meet these people.
Sure.
Because they're done so much in the sport. But being in those institutions, it's like giving me a key into the secret room, the back room, the club back room where all these guys hang out.
Yeah.
I get to just like sit at their feet and listen to the stories and ask questions, and I do. And I ask questions about these guys. What happened then? When that, tell me, Brad, about the last moto when you won the championship and how you hung back from I was just with Gary Jones this last weekend, 4-time AMA national champion and Hall of Famer, riding with him all weekend over in Oregon. And he told me the story about when Honda signed them away from Yamaha, and Mr. Honda himself brought a suitcase with $100,000 in it to a hotel in Vegas and put it on the bed to have them join Honda. And what that was like.
It's like a movie.
And to hear these stories, it's just incredible. I get to meet all these people that are still legends to me and heroes and the guys that were there to support, and I get to hang out with them. That's what, for me, that's the best part of it, is just getting to be a part of that and see all these guys. The fact that I'm in there, I wonder how that happened,
Yeah. Well, I have to imagine some of them probably know who you are as well. I mean, that's got to be kind of a fun surprise too.
Yeah, they definitely have heard of me by now, and I don't know. I'm very blessed. These guys have, it's like, I don't know how to put it, but it's like if you grew up in football and your heroes were Bart Starr and Kitty Stabler and Joe Montana and everything, and all of a sudden you're going to meetings and they're sitting at the table with you, and it's like, oh God, hey Joe, what was it like in that first Super Bowl? Or how about the first one when you were down in that last drive? And, I get to ask all these questions. It's incredible, Mark.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool.
It's like a dream come true. Yeah.
It is. And I'm also involved in trying to help those organizations raise money. I mean, like the AMA Hall of Fame. I'm a big advocate for that. That's our heritage. That's our, the museum there in Ohio. It's the receptacle of everything about our sport. You walk through there and you see all the names and the bikes that are on display and everything in there. And it's just humbling, and you just realize that, it takes money to keep these things going. And if we don't protect it and honor it and keep working to build it, it'll be gone. And then what? Then what do we have to show for all of this stuff?
Yeah.
All of this stuff is important, but anyway.
No, yeah, I love it. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think it's a kind of a good way to wrap up a little bit is kind of a 2-part question. Obviously, with where you're at, I think you've got a unique point of view to be able to speak on where you think maybe the future of motorcycles is, whether that's electric or more adventure riding or anything like that, and what you're seeing maybe and what you think is coming down the road in the future. But you mentioned it too at the beginning of how we can get more people into the sport. I'd love to hear your thoughts on both of those points.
Well, yeah, I'm really concerned about it at this point.
Okay.
If you look at the demographics of what's going on in America right now, our sport is still being carried by the baby boomers.
Mm.
And I'm a baby boomer. We've only got a few more years here, and we're going to be moving on to where our last motorcycle purchase is coming up here soon. And then we'll be, off in the old folks home. And then, millennials have kind of come along behind it and are kind of picking up some of the slack there. But as the farther you go down through Gen Z and all the other groups and get down to the alpha groups and everything, there's less and less participation. I'm really, really concerned about that. 1 in 4 kids in America, only 1 in 4 kids has even swung a leg over a bicycle.
Really?
Growing
I
up.
didn't know that.
These are the numbers, the hard numbers around it. And that's scary to think about.
Yeah.
If we don't start finding a way to bring more people in the sport, it's going to slowly contract away. And I'm in it. The fewer numbers we are, the less our voice becomes when it comes to regulatory things. At some point in time, motorcycling may be looked as some sort of conspicuous consumption. When the world is struggling for energy and other things. Well, why are these people out burning up oil and stuff when, to just frivolously like this? We need to control this better. I don't know. I just am really nervous about it. So obviously I was one of the original signatories on the MIC's Ride With Us program. I'd support anything that they're doing to try to draw new people to the sport. I created my own initiative back about 10 years ago called the Plus One Rider Program. And I worked on that for quite a while and with Harley dealers and different things. My biggest thing is the number one way to bring new people into the sport is through existing motorcyclists. So as a motorcyclist, Mark, I want to challenge you to bring one new person into the sport this year. It could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be a colleague at work.
Sure.
It could be anything, people that you come in contact with it, share your experience, invite them over to the house, for a dinner one night. Oh, by the way, let's go out in the garage, and get them talking about, hey, tell your neighbor, hey, I'm running down to the bike shop. Come with me. You got anything on? Come with me. Come down to the bike shop with me. There's just so many. Hey, what are you doing this weekend? Hey, there's a race in town. Let's go to the supercars. Drag them to it. Get them to see it. Get them involved. If we, there's the motorcycle sales are kind of going along and around the 500,000 unit level. But what people don't realize is there's more registered motorcycles than ever in the United States right now, 11 or 12 million. So there's a lot of motorcyclists out there.
Sure.
So if even with a small conversion rate, 2%, 3% a year, we can impact that number of bike sales tremendously. If existing motorcyclists just do a little something extra to bring the next rider along, spending millions of dollars on national advertising campaigns and social media efforts and all this stuff, that's all well and good and great, but there's no better way to get a guy convinced to join what we do than to let them see how it affects our life and how much fun and satisfaction we get from it and how much it enriches our lives than by just seeing our own experience. So Plus One Rider is still out there. I'm a big, I challenge anybody that's listening or watches this podcast to find one rider this year, one person to bring along and get them started on motorcycling.
Yeah. Well, challenge accepted. I will do my best. But no, I think you're right. I mean, it goes back to kind of how you got exposed to motorcycles. I mean, there was just one and you were in the right place and you had a chance to experience it. And that's all it took. And look at how much it changed your life. I mean, I think you could do that. That could happen to anybody, but you need that first initial hands-on experience, I think.
Yeah, you do. And I mean, I was blessed to have mentors and people that showed me the way. And I just want to pass it along. And I think that we all can do this in some way, shape, or form. And I don't know if motorcycling can't be taken for granted. There's a lot of challenges, and the biggest ones, economic challenges, but right now it's demographic challenges. And, those are pretty baked in. We aren't going to change the demographic situation here in the short term. So we need to be more proactive about taking who's out there and getting them involved in the sport.
Cool. Well, I feel empowered and like I have a mission. So I think that's a good note to end on. Scott, thank you so much for the time. As long as you'll come back on, I would love to have you again and talk more about off-road riding and the industry and everything. You've just got such a wealth of knowledge. I feel like we could have talked all day. So if you'd like to come back, I'd love to have you back.
Well, I will. And you guys are doing a great job too. I mean, I feel honored to be invited to join it. I went back and looked at some of the other podcasts you guys have done. You guys are part of the answer to growing the sport. A big part of that. And I commend you and applaud you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we need more Driven to Ride type podcasts out there.
Well, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. So, but before we do take off, how can folks connect with you and learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I have a website, www.harden, HARDEN-offroad.com. A lot of great stuff on there, stories about my racing career, a lot of articles that I've written about desert racing, I'm working on a book called Handstands at 100 that I plan to come out with here in the next few years about my racing career. There's a number of chapters that are in progress that are on there. Commentary on the sport, just a lot of different, the industry, a lot of great information on there. All my event information's on there, but go to my website and have at it.
Cool. Well, again, thank you, Scott, for the time. And I know this won't be the last time we see you, so we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Mark. You take care.
Thanks for listening to Driven to Ride. Interact with us and check out full unedited conversations, photos, interviews, video interviews, plus other goodies on YouTube or Instagram at Driven to Ride Podcast. Or you can check us out at driventoridepodcast.com. And make sure you leave us a rating and review from wherever you get your podcasts, too. If you have an idea for an episode or a guest, or you want to invite us out on an adventure, email us, hello@driventoridepodcast.com. Driven to Ride is wholly owned by Flint Rock LLC, made possible with help from Matthew Miles, and written, hosted, and produced by me, Mark Long. We'll see you out there.